Hi, Rick here again. Deep Space Nine, or Terok Nor, has been in the Bajor system for its entire life, but it's changed hands numerous times. For the majority of its time, it was in the hands of the Cardassian Union, but passes out of their control. So this video is to look at the history of the station that bore host to some of the greatest quadrant-shaping events in Star Trek lore. This video will contain occasional apocryphal content, but nothing too wild, like the station being blowed up in the 2380s and rebuilt with an identical one. The station itself is a Nor-class base, designed by the Cardassian Khotan Darek and the coercion of the Bajoran architect Chana Sar. Dubbed Terok Nor, the several other stations of this design were made by the Cardassians in other areas of their territory, such as Empok Nor. The occupation of Bajor was a move on part of the Cardassian Union to expand and conquer other planets to force them into servitude to their might. Such goals had brought them into conflict with entities such as the United Federation of Planets before in the past, but the UFP's dealing with much of Cardassia had been reactionary. Terok Nor was constructed to further this agenda. Bajor itself was rich in agricultural and mineral wealth, so as the Cardassians conquered it, they instilled a Bajoran occupational government which they could control in order to export that wealth through slavery. From 2346 to 2351, the orbital station was constructed over Bajor. When completed, its function was to refine iridium ore, which was mined on Bajor in labour camps before being brought to the station. From there it was loaded onto Cardassian vessels, which took the haul deep back into their territory to make new vessels and structures. The Bajoran slaves who built Terok Nor were then sentenced to death, to keep plans for the station from being passed on, but this was foiled by the Bajoran resistance. Command of the station was transferred over to Gul Dukat, and under his rule he appointed a non-Bajoran security chief in Constable Odo, and actively encouraged non-Bajoran businesses to open on the promenade, the inner ring of the station below the command levels. This was for the comfort and provision of his forces, although he'd probably twist it to seem more benevolent. At its peak, the refineries could churn out over 20,000 tons of uridium per day on the labour of its over 7,000 Bajoran slaves. The station also served as the seat of the prefect, the Cardassian official who oversaw the occupation of Bajor. Being an incredibly military-minded state society, the position of Gul, akin to a captain in rank, also came with numerous political obligations, such as managing the occupation. The Cardassian conquest-focused rule in the end would cut them too. With many of their goods being brought in from captured territories, Cardassia weakened its own agriculture and production in the long run, meaning it needed others to exploit, spiralling the military state further. Anyway, eventually the Cardassians withdrew from Bajor for an unknown reason. There are some that say that the Bajoran resistance emerged victorious, while most Cardassians simply say it was a political decision to let go of a system they no longer had use for. This withdrawal extended to Terok Nor, but before they left, the Cardassians were ordered to trash the station. They salvaged everything that might be of value, broke what was left, and even killed several of the supposedly non-affiliated shop owners on the promenade. In 2369, after the withdrawal of the Cardassians, Bajor dissolved its occupational government and reconstituted it into the provisional government, styling itself a republic. Sorely aware of the state of the ravaged planet and with many of its resources spent, or raised as part of the withdrawal order, the government made the decision to reach out to the Federation of Planets, not only in a request for support, but as consideration as a member world. After all, Bajor now had a unified planetary government, no societal segregation or caste-inducing laws, and had technically been a warp-capable species for longer than even humans. This was a conscientious choice in of itself. The Federation had publicly refused to help Bajor directly, as it would violate the Prime Directive. Moral or not, technically it would have, as the Bajoran occupational government still existed, technically was the primary political power of Bajor, and had made no such requests for aid. But I would point out that the Federation was at war with Cardassia at the time too. The border wars, and many point to this as a factor in the Cardassians' retreat. Now free, Bajor created their own militia, so called as it recruited from the civilian populace, and many of the former freedom fighters joined up, their work in taking back the planet done, now looking to rebuild. In the same vein of reclaiming their planet, Bajor took ownership of the abandoned Terok Nor, with an eye to utilise its facilities for their own benefit, only to find the place a complete wreck. It was in short order that the provisional government then came to an agreement with the Federation that they could run their operations in helping to rebuild Bajor from Terok Nor, but the station would remain under Bajoran sovereignty. As such, it would support crews of both Bajoran militia and Starfleet personnel, but the ultimate running of the station would be managed by Starfleet. What to do with the station, however, was Bajor's decision, and they appointed Major Kieran Reese to oversee those interests, serving as the station's executive officer. Starfleet, in the meantime, sent Commander Benjamin Sisko to help rebuild and prep Bajor for UFP membership, should they continue this route. The UFP even sent the Enterprise D as a show of the importance with which they regarded this endeavour. As a Federation-run station, it was termed Deep Space Nine, and would be run like a Federation starbase. This too rubbed some shoulders the wrong way on Bajor, as they felt like the Federation would impose its own rules over Bajor and threaten the independence they had worked so hard to achieve. Nevertheless, the governments agreed and reconstruction of the station began, while similar agricultural and infrastructure projects were conducted on Bajor itself. It helped that Bajor was on the track to Federation membership, as it enabled a freer exchange of technology and the like than with a planet completely outside of the UFP's jurisdiction, even if help had been requested. Might be a bit cynical to look at it this way, but in effect, the Federation was making an investment in a prosperous future Bajor. Exactly what the Bajorans had planned for the station we'll never know for sure, because soon after the Federation administration was completed, it was relocated to the Denorius belt to guard the newly discovered wormhole that orbited the bridge to the Gamma Quadrant at only 1,000 kilometers away. This order, notably, was given not by Starfleet, but by the Bajoran militia XO Major Kira. Again, Starfleet runs the station, but Bajor decides what to do with it. This new discovery changed how DS9 was viewed overnight, and the importance of the Bajor system exploded. Now, instead of reopening the refineries, the station became a centre of trade and commerce to a new unexplored region of space. The shots of the promenade were being encouraged to remain even before the discovery of the wormhole, but now the Bajor system suddenly was the place to be, a new frontier. Bajor suddenly was managing requests and trade from several other species, all looking to utilise the wormhole, and the UFP was at the head of the queue. This would have gone a long way in aiding the rebuilding of Bajor. Starfleet would continue to manage exploration and the policing of the wormhole from Deep Space Nine, but was mindful of the fact that the phenomena was also a Bajoran site of cultural significance, their celestial temple, as well as being in their space. The balance between the UFP and Bajor was not always smooth. There were often arguments about access to the temple, and Sisko's appointment as reluctant emissary to the prophets served to both aid and hinder the efforts. Overall, the Federation would protect Bajor and its interests in return for priority access to the Gamma Quadrant, but also was aware that it needed to allow others access too in order to encourage the growth of Bajor. With brewing turmoil with the Dominion, Starfleet saw fit to drastically upgrade the station, converting it from the site of trade into a strategic compound too. What qualms Bajor may have had about this were quashed with the decisions to halt its Federation membership application and sign a non-aggression pact with the Dominion. This politically distanced the recovering Bajor from the Federation and saved the planet much more grief, an act that ultimately would affirm the notion that Starfleet, unlike the Cardassians before, prized Bajor as a world, not a resource. The order was given to untangle the Federation presence on the station from Bajor, and Starfleet was formally asked by Bajor's representative Kira to leave. Side note, I love that scene, and the episode is a call to arms if you're interested. Starfleet installed much equipment on the station, which would continue to remain their property, although Bajoran personnel were trained in its operation, including numerous auxiliary craft in the form of runabouts and eventually the USS Defiant. This is also why Bajoran security on the station still only use Bajoran phasers and the like. This equipment was notably destroyed when the Federation had to abandon the station to the Dominion. When the order was given by Kira to sabotage the station itself, it was not only to spite the Dominion, but maintain the Prime Directive. The Dominion effectively then instills its presence on the station, taking up the position the Federation once had, in that Deep Space Nine, or Tarak Nor as it was renamed, was still a Bajoran station, ceded to them 5 years earlier by the Cardassians. However, as the Cardassians were now part of the Dominion's partnership, in practice Gul Dukat had regained control of the space station. This second rule was not as dire as the Cardassians' occupation, however, as Cardassia was restrained by the Dominion's non-aggression pact, and so could not re-engage in its monstrous actions as before without violating the Dominion's policies, and the Dominion was far more powerful than Cardassia. When Starfleet retook the station in Operation Return, Bajor clandestinely supported this decision but remained technically neutral until the end of the Dominion War and the signing of the Treaty of Bajor. At the end of it all, Bajor's petition to join the Federation continued, despite the pause, but throughout the entire show, the station remained property of the Bajorans. As for what happens when Bajor joins the Federation in full, most starbases constructed by Starfleet are their creations, but Deep Space Nine is a special case. It would, in all likelihood, remain outside of Federation property, but still be as a Federation station. Basically, I think in order to maintain the level of commerce that flows through DS9, the status quo, as of last time we saw it, would generally be maintained. So, thanks for following me into this look back over the history of the Bajorans station Deep Space Nine. I've always liked how it was this place of grimness and harshness, which is reflected in its spiky design, but its heart was kind of redeemed. Purified? Ultimately, it was built to do great harm to Bajor, but ended up supplying much in the way of its salvation. Thanks again for watching. I've been Rick, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.